There is a number in your head right now. You may not say it out loud, but it lives there quietly. It is the amount of money you believe would finally let you exhale, the figure that would make the worry stop and the future feel solid beneath your feet. And here is the strange part. The moment you reach it, it will move. You have felt this before, even if you never gave it a name. Think back to the first paycheck that felt like freedom. Think back to the raise you were certain would change your life. For a few weeks, maybe a month, the world felt lighter and you walked a little taller and the future looked a little brighter. And then, slowly, it faded. The new number became the normal number, and your eyes drifted almost on their own toward the next one. Why does this keep happening to you? It happens to nearly everyone, and it has a name, and it was uncovered in one of the strangest experiments in the history of psychology. In 1978, three researchers named Philip Brickman, Dan Coates, and Ronnie Janoff Bullman went searching for the happiest people they could find. They tracked down people who had just won the lottery, major winners, sums large enough to erase every money problem they had ever known. Then they did something that sounds almost cruel. They compared those winners to a group of people who had recently been paralyzed in accidents. You can already guess what you would expect to find. The winners should have been glowing. The accident victims should have been broken. But the data refused to cooperate. The lottery winners were barely happier than ordinary people. And stranger still, they reported taking less pleasure from the small things. The warm meal, the morning sun, the easy conversation, than people who had won nothing at all. What had happened to them? Winning had quietly raised the bar for what counted as good. Set against the blinding memory of the jackpot, an ordinary Tuesday felt grey. The researchers had a name for this. They called it adaptation, and you may know it by its more famous nickname, the hedonic treadmill. Picture that word literally for a moment. You step on, you start to run, and the belt speeds up to match you, so you run faster, and it speeds up again. You can sprint until your lungs burn and still end up exactly where you began. Does that feel familiar? This is the first reason you will never feel rich. Your mind is built to adjust to whatever it is given. Whatever you own becomes the new baseline almost the instant you own it. The dream home becomes just the house. The car you saved 3 years for becomes the thing you take to the grocery store. The salary that once seemed impossible becomes the salary you quietly resent every other Friday. You are not broken for feeling this way. You are running exactly as you were designed to run. But adaptation is only half of the trap. There is a second force at work, and for years, the smartest people studying it could not even agree on how it behaved. In 2010, two researchers at Princeton, Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton, published a study that became one of the most repeated claims about money in modern memory. Kahneman was no ordinary scientist. He had already won a Nobel Prize for changing how the world understood the human mind. Together, they analyzed the answers of more than 450,000 Americans, and they reported something that raced around the globe. Everyday happiness did climb as income climbed, but only up to a point. Beyond roughly $75,000 a year, the emotional payoff appeared to level off and flatten. The figure caught fire. $75,000 became a kind of folk wisdom. The magic salary at which money supposedly stopped buying happiness. But was that the whole truth? About a decade later, a younger researcher named Matthew Killingsworth at the University of Pennsylvania decided to test the claim with sharper tools. Instead of asking people to look back and remember how they had felt, he interrupted them in the middle of their actual lives, pinging their phones at random and asking how they felt in that exact moment. He collected more than 1 million of these tiny windows into real human mood, and his results told a different story. Happiness did not stop at $75,000. It kept rising steadily, even for people who earned far beyond it. So who was right? The Nobel laureate or the newcomer with the better data? What happened next is rare, and it is the most hopeful part of this whole story. Instead of fighting it out in public, Kahneman and Killingsworth chose the opposite path. They joined forces. In 2023, working alongside a third researcher named Barbara Mellers, they published their answer together in what scientists call an adversarial collaboration, where rivals combine their efforts to hunt down the truth instead of defending their pride. And the truth they found was subtler than either had expected. For most people, more money does keep lifting happiness, with no clear ceiling in sight. But for an unhappy minority, the people already weighed down by grief or loneliness or pain, money helps only up to a point, and then its power runs out. Sit with that for a second, because it quietly overturns the story you were sold. Money was never simply buying happiness. For most people, it was buying the removal of certain specific miseries. And once those miseries were gone, the money had far less left to do. So let us place the two forces side by side, because together they finally explain the number in your head. The first force is adaptation. Whatever you receive, you grow used to. The second force is comparison. You do not measure your wealth against your own past. You measure it against the people standing around you. An economist named Richard Easterlin noticed this decades ago. He found that within any country, richer people do tend to report being happier than poorer people. Yet, as entire nations grew dramatically wealthier over the years, their average happiness barely moved at all. How can a country get richer and no happier at the same time? Because wealth, to the human mind, is not a fixed amount. It is a ranking. When everyone rises together, your position in the line stays exactly the same, and so does the feeling. Now add the world you actually live in. Your ancestors compared themselves to a few dozen neighbors in a single village. You compare yourself to the most polished, most expensive, most carefully chosen sliver of 10,000 strangers, scrolling past your eyes before you have even finished breakfast. The people around you have never, in all of history, looked so rich, and most of what you are seeing is not even real. You are running on the treadmill, and 1,000 invisible hands keep tilting the floor. Think of the last time a screen made you feel behind. A kitchen you will never cook in. A beach you will never lie on. A life arranged, lit, and edited until it looked effortless. For a moment, it made your own perfectly good life feel small and slow and not quite enough. But that feeling was not information. It was simply the floor tilting again one more time beneath your feet. Step back and feel the weight of what this means. The reason you do not feel rich has almost nothing to do with the actual money in your account. A family from the year 1900 would look at your life, the clean water that appears at a touch, the light that banishes the night, the food gathered from across the planet, the glass rectangle in your pocket that holds nearly all of human knowledge, and they would call you wealthy beyond anything they could dream. You do not feel it, not because they would be wrong, but because you are not comparing your life to 1900. You are comparing it to the person one single rung above you, and there is always another rung. So, is it hopeless? Are you simply condemned to chase a number that sprints away from you for the rest of your life? Not quite, because the very research that exposes the trap also quietly points at the door out. Notice what every one of these studies kept circling back to. The lottery winners lost their taste for small pleasures. The unhappiest people could not be saved by income at all. The richer nations did not rise. Underneath all of it sits a single pattern. Money stops working the moment you use it to climb, and it starts working the moment you use it to live. This is exactly what other researchers found when they looked at how people actually spend. Elizabeth Dunn and Michael Norton spent years studying the link between money and joy, and again, they landed on the same conclusion. People who spend on experiences instead of objects, and who spend on other people instead of only themselves, end up measurably happier. Why would that be? Because you adapt to a sofa, but you do not adapt to a memory in the same way. A possession sits in the corner, slowly becoming invisible. An afternoon with someone you love refuses to flatten into background noise, and money handed to another person buys a kind of warmth that a bigger television never can. You cannot simply switch adaptation off. It kept your ancestors alive, forever reaching, never satisfied, always straining toward the next ridge on the horizon. But you can learn to see it. And seeing it is where the freedom begins. The next time your gaze drifts toward the next number, the larger house, the better title, the friend who seems to have so much more, you can stop and ask a quieter question. Not how do I get more, but when did I last actually feel the thing I already have? That pause, it turns out, is worth more than the raise. And it asks nothing of you. No promotion, no windfall, no lucky break. Only the willingness to want what you already chose, the home you once dreamed about, the people who are still here, the quiet ordinary day you would have begged for a few short years ago. Because here is the conclusion. It took some of the sharpest minds in science 50 years of argument to circle. Feeling rich was